Paul. Yeah. I'm just sitting here asking myself why it is that in the United States of America, my right to due process has not been enforced. Yeah. Asking myself, well, I have proven that the protection order violates my rights and the rights of my family. Yeah. I'd emailed those in law enforcement, those that are sheriffs and police officers. Yeah. Those that had sworn that they would support and defend the Constitution of the United States. You know, we have a taxation system in the United States that, as Americans, I had explained that we're not a communist nation. I understood we were a capitalistic nation. We earn what money we are able to earn, and then we pay taxes on the income that we receive. And the Constitution does allow for taxing the income of the American population. Yes, it does. But other nations, they have what's known as the VAT. Let me see what it's called here. The value added tax. Yeah. A tax upon the difference between the cost of an asset and its present fair market. Ad valorem tax. Yeah. And quite often when you're considering, well, how do you tax the population? You know, I've been to Victoria a number of times. I had once one. I was in the leadership circle. I was in the top 8% of all financial consultants. Yeah, and as a financial consultant, I really did like helping people manage their money so as to invest for the long term. But I had one 3-day weekend at a very nice hotel in Victoria, and Heidi and myself, and I think we had. I don't think Deacon was born. It was probably because each time I was in the top 8% a number of times. If you look at my income, I provided a Social Security statement of actual income. I made over $1 million in 5 years. Now, I know that taxing American citizens and other nations that have a VAT, it could be that are we exempt as American citizens from paying the taxes of other nations? Sales tax. You know, I'd emailed the Parliament of Canada and I'd said, well, my constitutional rights are being violated, and I thought the Canadians would have spoke to the White House about their obligation to enforce treaties and international conventions. Now, let's say I was in Victoria and we won a nice 3-day weekend and we went to the King Tut exhibit. Do you remember the pharaohs that they used to have in Egypt? Now, as an American, I think I've paid foreign nation taxes before, Pope. They weren't income taxes. They might have been sales taxes, value-added taxes. Now, I could find out the exact amount of taxation that every citizen is paid in every nation. Then I could find out what citizens were not actually the citizens of the nation that they paid the VAT in. Now, it could be just a Canadian dollar's worth of tax. Would obligate that government to enforce the treaties and conventions. You know, when you pay taxes in other nations, there is a certain amount of obligation for those nations to enforce the treaty obligations of their respective constitutions. Now, in the United States, I paid a lot of tax. I made over $1 million in 5 years, and I was in about the 28 to 30% tax bracket. I had quite a few charitable deductions. I would tithe and offer more than 10% of my actual gross income. Yes. And I did have a small home in Squim where I could deduct the mortgage interest that I was paying. Yep. But let's say I inform law enforcement that the Constitution's being violated, and they decide they're not going to enforce the Constitution when I've paid a lot of income tax. Now, I'm not going to use the old standby of representation, taxation without representation. I'm going to look in the Constitution. What right do I have to sue the federal government for not enforcing the laws of the United States when I've paid income tax that has supported their income? Yeah. Now, if you could give me all the income tax and all the sales tax that I've paid for the last 40 years, kind of thinking I'm going to have to sue the government, those that are sheriffs, those that are police officers, those that are in the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, Homeland Security, the IRS, and any and all individuals that have badges and guns for not enforcing my rights when I have paid for the government to be in operation. Poo poo, pow, pow, pow! Now, I didn't want to start the day this way, but I'm going to need to know the actual income taxes of every nation that has a treaty with the United States, every citizen of those nations, and any and all foreign citizens that have paid any VAT to any other foreign nation.